The most important offensive against the enemy in the Solomons since the attack on Guadalcanal was underway.
In the summer of 1943, the New Georgia campaign was launched by combined Allied forces to secure the island of New Georgia in the Pacific theater of World War II. The 43rd Infantry Division, a National Guard division from New England, was one of the units tasked with this mission. The campaign was a grueling and costly battle, and the soldiers of the 43rd Infantry Division faced significant challenges, including harsh terrain, limited supplies, and determined Japanese resistance. But perhaps the greatest challenge faced by these soldiers was the impact of neuropsychiatric casualties on their ranks. These injuries were caused by exposure to the stress and trauma of combat, and they could manifest in a variety of ways, including anxiety, depression, and dissociation. Soldiers who suffered from neuropsychiatric casualties often found themselves unable to continue fighting, and they were frequently stigmatized as cowards or malingerers by their fellow soldiers and superiors. In his summary of the New Georgia operation, 14 Corps Commander Major General Oscar W. Griswold notes the damage of neuropsychiatric casualties and recommends more appropriate preparation for combat.
Nervous men have been known to get scared of each other in the dark and cut each other up at times with fatal results. Something positive is needed in the way of preparing a new command mentally and psychologically for the jungle, which is an unknown and fearsome thing in itself, and for the Japanese. I saw far too much war neurosis in certain units here. A man who is beside himself with fear is pathetic and dreadful to see, and the thing is like an infectious disease. Officers are not immune.
In their first days on New Georgia, the 43rd, particularly the 169th, failed to take even those rudimentary defensive procedures they would have to learn the hard way. The official army account reports foxholes were more than 6 feet apart. The 169th Infantry Regiment laid no barbed wire or tripwire with hanging tin cans that rattled when struck by a man's foot or leg, and warned of the approach of the enemy. Thus, when darkness fell and the Japanese began their night harassing tactics, moving around, shouting and occasionally firing, the imaginations of the tired and inexperienced American soldiers began to work. They thought the Japanese were all around them, infiltrating their perimeter with ease. Affected by weariness and the presence of the enemy, they apparently forgot their minds. The phosphorescence of the rotten logs became Japanese signals. The smell of the jungle became poison gas. The slithering of the many land crabs was interpreted as the approaching Japanese. Men of the 169th are reported to have told each other that Japanese nocturnal raiders wore long black robes, and that some came with hooks and ropes to drag Americans from the pampa at their foxholes. In consequence, the men of the battalion spent their nights nervously and sleeplessly, and apparently violated orders by shooting indiscriminately at imaginary targets. Furthermore, propaganda during the war often made things worse by portraying the enemy as superhuman or inhuman, heightening soldiers' fears and making it more difficult for them to control their emotions during battle.
Hacking our way through the jungle, we tended to think of the enemy as wily Orientals at home in this nightmarish terrain. We forgot that they were young men from crowded cities like Tokyo and farmland like Kyushu, just as we were city boys from Boston or country lads from Georgia.
In this context, rumors and misinformation easily spread and exacerbated negative fantasies, contributing to a significant number of neuropsychiatric casualties. The 37th Division surgeon commented on the difficulty of classifying neuropsychiatric casualties.
There are 4 general types. First, there is the man who evidently had a psychopathic background and was not detected at induction. Second, there is the lad doing a good job who is cool and collected. Suddenly a shell or bomb explodes near him, which throws him into an uncoordinated creature that is absolutely valueless. That fellow is definitely a battle casualty. I mean, there is no personal background. It must be on the basis of an injury. Third, there are those who don't have a definite psychopathic history. They may be weak characters, and due to fatigue and frightening circumstances, they become temporarily deranged, so they can't function properly. With some rest, many of these fellows can be salvaged. Not all of them. Fourth, there is the individual who probably borders on malingerer's type, just yellow, and wants to get out of the picture. He is valueless.
How do you feel about going back to duty?
I don't know, sir. My back doesn't get any better.
Major K. Graham Fushak's report on the 43rd Infantry Division's experiences during the New Georgia campaign provides valuable insight into the nature and extent of neuropsychiatric casualties among these soldiers. Fushak notes that the division suffered from a high rate of neuropsychiatric casualties, with 1,800 soldiers being evacuated due to these injuries. This represented over 10% of the division's total strength, and it had a significant impact on the unit's ability to continue fighting effectively. One of the factors that contributed to the high rate of neuropsychiatric casualties among the soldiers of the 43rd Infantry Division was the intensity of the combat they faced. The Japanese defenders of New Georgia were determined and well prepared, and they employed a variety of tactics to make the Allied advance difficult. Eric Hamel's book, Munda Trail, provides a vivid account of the challenges faced by the soldiers of the 43rd Infantry Division during the campaign. Hamel describes the steep ridges, thick jungle, and oppressive heat that made the fighting on New Georgia so grueling. He also notes the importance of close combat, as the Japanese defenders often launched counterattacks that had to be repulsed at close range. According to the official army account, the reason behind the failure of the 169th was attributed to the fact that they had been roughly handled by the Japanese the previous night. The night before the attack, the 9th of July, the 3rd Battalion 169th was bivouacked near Bloody Hill. When the Japanese made their presence known, or when the Americans thought there were Japanese within their bivouacs, there was a great deal of confusion, shooting and stabbing. Some men knifed each other. Men threw grenades blindly in the dark. Some of the grenades hit trees, bounced back, and exploded among the Americans. Some soldiers fired round after round to little avail. In the morning, no trace remained of Japanese dead or wounded, but there were American casualties. Some had been stabbed to death, some wounded by knives. Many suffered grenade fragment wounds, and 50% of these were caused by fragments from American grenades. And there now appeared the first large number of cases diagnosed as neurosis. The regiment was to suffer 700 by the 31st of July. Thus continued the pattern that would be the hallmark of the drive on Munda. Little to no daylight progress, night harassment by the Japanese, mounting neuropsychiatric casualties, mounting killed and wounded in action, and fratricide as 43rd soldiers fired, stabbed, and threw grenades at each other. Intelligence log for the 10th of July has this revealing entry.
0630 hours, Zanana Beachhead. Japs sneaked into the beach area, stabbing men. One was killed and an undetermined number wounded. Note, it was later reported that no Japs were in the area for a certainty, but that the men did the damage among themselves.
The next entry, 30 minutes later.
Quite a few casualties. 0930. 1st Battalion 169th Boys reported that the Japs used a kind of gas on them last night. It smelled like almonds and it made them groggy. They would then jump up in their holes and move around, giving the Japs a chance to inflict casualties.
Note the specific touch of almond smell in the tale, a detail perhaps added in the frantic attempt for authenticity. In his report on the medical service in the New Georgia campaign, Colonel Franklin T. Hallam, the ranking medical officer, gave this graphic description of the symptoms.
At least 50% of these individuals requiring medical attention or entering medical installations were the picture of utter exhaustion, face expressionless, knees sagging, body bent forward, arms slightly flexed and hanging loosely, hands with palms slightly cupped, marked coarse tremor of fingers, feet dragging, and an overall appearance of apathy and physical exhaustion. About 20% of the total group were highly excited, crying, wringing their hands, mumbling incoherently, an expression of utter fright or fear, trembling all over, startled at the least sound or unusual commotion, having the appearance of trying to escape impending disaster. Another 15% showed manifestations of the various types of true psychoneurotic complexes. The remaining 15% included the anxiety states and those with various bizarre somatic disturbances. These were the individuals whose symptoms were of insidious onset, starting with insomnia, vague digestive symptoms, bad dreams, frequency of urination, irritability, diminished ability to concentrate, and a generally reduced efficiency in the performance of assigned duties.
The combination of these physical and psychological stresses took a significant toll on the soldiers of the 43rd Infantry Division. William Manchester's memoir, Goodbye Darkness, a memoir of the Pacific War, presents an intimate portrayal of the effects of neuropsychiatric casualties. Manchester's own service in the Pacific Theatre during World War II lends a unique perspective to his narrative, shedding light on the experiences of soldiers throughout the theatre. He describes soldiers breaking down in tears, screaming in terror, or simply becoming paralyzed by fear. He notes the stigma that was attached to these injuries, and how soldiers who suffered from them often felt ashamed and isolated. The emotional toll of neuropsychiatric casualties was significant, and it had long-term consequences for the soldiers who suffered from them. Many soldiers who were evacuated due to neuropsychiatric casualties were unable to return to combat, and some were discharged from the military entirely. Others struggled with the after-effects of their injuries for years, experiencing nightmares, flashbacks, and other symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Some turned to alcohol or drugs to cope with their trauma, while others found solace in religion or other forms of support. The medical response to neuropsychiatric casualties in the 43rd Infantry Division was complex and challenging. Fuchsak notes that the division had a robust system for identifying soldiers who were suffering from neuropsychiatric injuries and for providing them with appropriate care. This care could take a variety of forms, including rest, relaxation, and medication. However, providing this care in the midst of a combat zone was a significant challenge. Medical personnel were often overworked and understaffed, and they frequently had to operate in dangerous and unpredictable environments. The availability of medical supplies and equipment was also limited, which made it difficult to provide comprehensive care to all those who needed it. The experiences of the soldiers of the 43rd Infantry Division during the New Georgia campaign highlight the broader implications of neuropsychiatric casualties in war. Paul Fussell's book, Wartime Understanding and Behavior in the Second World War, provides valuable context for understanding the impact of these injuries on soldiers, families, and society as a whole. Fussell notes that neuropsychiatric casualties were a major issue in World War II. He argues that these injuries contributed to a sense of disillusionment and cynicism among soldiers, who felt that they had been abandoned by their leaders and their society. Fussell also notes that the treatment of neuropsychiatric casualties in World War II marked a significant shift in the way that mental health was perceived and treated in American society.
That is a common concern among servicemen who have developed nervous conditions during their stay in the Army as to what the public is going to think about them. Undoubtedly, there will be people on the outside who won't have any understanding of the condition.
Prior to the war, mental illness was often stigmatized and poorly understood. However, the experiences of soldiers in World War II helped to change this perception, as it became clear that these injuries were not the result of weakness or cowardice, but rather the inevitable consequence of exposure to the stresses and traumas of combat.
In prolonged engagements where the going is really tough, 30 to 50% of all men coming under your care in the divisional area are suffering from combat exhaustion. You are not requested to treat these patients. You are directed to do so.
The 43rd Infantryman was just one of millions of young men thrust into the chaos and uncertainty of World War II.
The boys went to camp and drilled and trained with their old equipment and wrote cheerful letters home about how they could whip anybody when they got their guns.
Given little time to train, the 43rd soldier received inadequate training with outdated equipment and tactics in various small units, constantly moving from camp to camp and island to island. He had never maneuvered with his squad through the jungle at night and knew little about his fellow squad members, who were constantly changing. Doubts about his leader's competence crept in, as they seemed to know little more than he did. The soldier was acutely aware of the dangerous enemy he faced, skilled at navigating the treacherous jungle. His fellow soldier in the adjacent foxhole was nervous, jumpy, and talked in his sleep. It was dark, wet, and the jungle was full of strange noises, any one of which could represent a threat to his life. The soldier was scared and desperately searching for something or someone to replace his fear with confidence. His training provided little help in navigating the jungle, and he was hesitant to share his fears with his fellow soldiers, who seemed equally frightened. Like countless other American soldiers of World War II, this soldier was a product of mass production. Joe was expected to immediately interact with all other mass-produced Joes in perfect harmony. The notion that each individual might need personalized care and attention was not a priority in the race to defeat the Axis powers. Men require allowances if they are to be successful soldiers. They need appropriate training, medical care, and unit cohesion on an individual basis. Each man is unique, with different needs and vulnerabilities. Society has always strived for uniformity in soldiers, treating them like machines rather than human beings. The mass-produced American army of World War II failed to make allowances for the reality that men are not machines, and in doing so, ensured that greater allowances would have to be made. The experiences of the 43rd Infantry Division during the New Georgia campaign provide valuable insight into the impact of neuropsychiatric casualties on soldiers in World War II, and they had significant social and cultural consequences. However, the response to these injuries also helped to change the way that mental health was perceived and treated in American society.
Others show no outward signs, yet they too are wounded.
By drawing on primary sources and scholarly research, we can gain a deeper understanding of the experiences of soldiers in World War II and the lessons that we can learn from their struggles and sacrifices.
Any study of history is a journey into a foggy and brooding world unwilling to surrender its secrets. More difficult still is a journey into the minds of soldiers. Their actions in combat and their memories are not ruled by the laws of cause and effect. They speak to us from out-of-body experiences, from chaos, from an obscenely unfamiliar country. If General Sherman is correct, and war is indeed hell, then soldiers speak to us from hell.